So rolls us right into this. Just to give you a little background, my name is Dean Notarnicola, currently a IT architect. I started life in technology when I was 14. I saw a copy of Popular Science that had these home computers on it you could buy, and something just snapped in my brain. I had to have one. I worked all year, saved my pennies. It was either going to be this or an Apple II. Couldn't afford the Apple II, plus it was hard to find back then. It wasn't like there was a computer store around every corner. But there was a Radio Shack. Right? That's the big reason for the success of these machines was their marketing reach. So I bought it, locked myself in my room for 3 months and tried to learn everything I could about it. Started out programming, wanted to do more with the hardware, so I started hacking the hardware a little bit. And that pretty much got me started in my technology career, so I have a debt to Tandy and Radio Shack.
So what model was it that you had to...
Oh, I'm sorry, TRS-80 Model 1. So 79, that was basically pretty much the only machine you could buy from there. 1980, well, I'm going to go into it. I don't want to skip ahead. But thank you. So this is what started it all. TRS-80 Model 1. I put catalog numbers because that Radio Shack stuff, that's what we do. We know everything by a catalog number. So 1001, especially if you're a collector. Right, that's the one that started it all. 4K, level 1 basic, which was, boy, it wasn't even tiny basic. It was tiny basic. You really couldn't do a lot with it. As you know, the graphics were very limited. There was no way you could put an expansion unit on this with the amount of memory it had. So these days, again, if you're a collector, to find one of these unmodified, unupgraded is a really cool find. So my advice to people when they find one of these, oh, should I put more memory in it? Should I do? No, please, leave it alone. You can find plenty of level 2 16K machines out there. So this was introduced in 1977, part of the Trinity, Apple, Commodore, and TRS-80. Again, the thing was to reach a mass market, right? So the idea with this was, didn't need a lot of power, didn't need a lot of memory, just get it out there, get it out at a price you could afford. It was $6.99 for the base unit. Everything was a la carte. You know, if you wanted the cassette recorder, the monitor, it was all bundled separately. You could get. Okay, those are the specs. It was a Z80 at 1.77 megahertz. You'll hear a lot of flack from the 6502 guys, like, oh, your processor was clock faster, but it's not any faster. Well, yeah, it wasn't the most efficient at certain operations. It was better at some, had a better register set. But it was, you know, and at the end of the day, it was about equivalent. Had semi-graphics, so in other words, it didn't have a bitmap character display. It was the graphics blocks were defined in the ASCII's character set, which was kind of cool. So in BASIC, you could write games and you could move things around the screen pretty quickly by doing string manipulation, because they were just ASCII characters. So all kinds of tricks you could do with that. Storage, the base storage was a cassette recorder. Unless you got a memory upgrade and an expansion unit, then you could add a disk drive, and it would plug into the expansion bus. The expansion bus was pretty much every signal you could possibly want off the processor. Right. Level 1 basic. It was very limited, but it was the way a lot of us learned programming for the first time. Chris remembers this one, this presentation. Next step up was Model 1 Level 2. This was the machine I actually ended up with the 16K and the cassette recorder. Couldn't have a disk drive at that point. They came out with several models, several different levels, 16K level 1, which I don't know why you would even want that. A 4K level 2 and a 16K level 2, which was the most popular unit they sold for obvious reasons. There was also 26-1006A, and I believe the A was just a bug fix unit. It just meant that it had some modification to it. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Just the other day I was thinking about this and what it was, and now I can't remember what it was. That's what speaker knows it for, I guess. Anyway, so those are, again, if you're a collector, it's important information. Wasn't the key bounce? It might have been the external bounce.
Key bounce fix came much later.
Did it?
It was quite a while. They replaced the whole keyboard with the textured keys.
Yeah, before that they gave you a little
software.
There was a cassette board fix.
Yeah, keyD.com, you have to run that.
For the cassette, there was a board they added, the XRX3 mod. That might have been the A version.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? I think you're right. That was the A. It was the cassette.
Yeah, it took care of some.
Because you used to have the volume just right.
Exactly right. Yeah, luckily when I bought mine, the A was already out. That was the first one I had, and I had to deal with that or the key bounce. So I was a pretty lucky kid at that point. The display was just basically a rebadged RCA television with the RF section removed. You could actually use any composite display with a TRS-80. You just have to, there's a 5-volt reference signal that has to be pulled down from the machine before it will output the composite video. So as long as you do that, you use any monitor you want.
Now I know.
Yeah, they were tricky that way. I always wondered when I was a kid, I wondered, why am I not getting any video out of this stupid thing? I didn't, There's a motherboard. It's really basic, right? CPU, some I/O chips. There's that magic 5-volt regulator that if that is off, you'll get video issues. A lot of times you get booming video. It's because the regulator's out of spec. You just replace it, and that fixes it. The expansion connector, which needs some TLC every once in a while, especially if you plug and unplug it. It was just pinned, so it was pretty not very reliable. The keyboard is soldered to a ribbon connector. Again, if you're taking this thing apart, you're looking to do work on it, restore it, just really be very, very careful when you're dealing with that. Very, very fragile. You don't want to be soldering a new ribbon connector on there. It's not a lot of fun.
So, I'm sorry, the keyboard is basically tied directly to the motherboard and it's all one piece. It's not like plug in or plug out?
No, there's no socket there. It's just soldered directly to that short piece of ribbon cable.
Yeah, I don't.
And more to the point, I think the question you're asking is, the thing that looks like a keyboard, that's the whole computer.
Right. That's big. That's the.
Oh, okay. The keyboard is sitting on top.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You would fold that over, and then the keyboard would sit on the other side.
Good catch. I didn't get the question.
Keyboard base. Yeah. Your video, your power, and your cassette connection up there. Unfortunately, the power and the keyboard had the same number of pins, so you could switch the sockets. And you want to be careful about that. I was really paranoid about that when I was a kid.
Where's the video chip?
Yeah, right.
That's a trick question.
That's the SID right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but I mean, I learned how the video works on that. It's like, you know, it's like cavemen with sticks. It's brilliant.
It's like something Woz would have come up with, right? Real simple, cheap.
Like the two
I
drives.
mean, talk about like bit banging. I mean, they were bit banging video.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the cool thing was that it was completely memory mapped too, right? So even though you didn't really have bit level graphics, at least there was had a dedicated area of video memory. So again, if being a kid, what's the first thing you want to do? Write games. Yeah, you can poke stuff right into video memory. One of the first assembly language programs I ever wrote was because I wanted to invert the screen. Well, to do it in BASIC, you could sit there and just watch it, boop, 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 boop. And I learned the magic of Boolean operators. I learned that you could XOR any character by 64, and it would flip it to its inverse shape. So it went from boop, boop, boop to bang, the screen inverted. So that first working assembly language programmer wrote out, I was over the moon.
Sold on assembly language.
What's that?
I said that's all you need to be sold on assembly.
Oh, that was it. I was like, oh, this is magic. Absolute magic. So again, if you were lucky and you had a lot of money, you could buy an expansion interface. The first versions of these were a little problematic. If you've ever seen, if you guys are familiar, you've seen some that have big, thick buffered cable. They had some electrical noise issues, some RF issues.
Yeah, I know those expansion boxes like that.
Yeah.
Big old fire hose, I think they called it, because it was just about thick.
Yeah, it was. It was black and it was really thick, and it had some buffering chips in it. That was to avoid, there was, you get random reboots, right? Just using it. If you tap the keyboard a little too hard, you lose your whole program. So yeah, it was a little annoying. So later revisions, they fixed that. But what was cool about this is it let you hook up all kinds of stuff. You could hook up floppy drives. You could hook up an extra cassette player, which, okay, you know. But the nice thing is you could use the second cassette port for your cassettes. You could use the first one hooked up. You could leave it hooked up to a little amplifier. So when you were playing games, you get that 1-bit. There was 1-bit sound out of the port. And actually, it works surprisingly well. In assembly language, you can hit that thing pretty quickly, and you get some pretty decent frequencies out of it. And if you really knew your stuff, there was a program, and again, if you guys are familiar with paddle pinball, and it had some intro sounds, and whoever wrote it actually managed to multiplex 3 tones. Right, so because they did a clever little programming trick. You really couldn't do much of that though. During the game, during any kind of sound effects, everything on the screen just stopped. So you didn't have a lot of horsepower to work with. Officially, you needed 48K of memory to run this system. You could load TRS-DOS on a 16K system, but you'd have nothing left to work with. So it just didn't work. Storage options. The first cassette recorder they sold was based on their consumer level cassette recorder. Had tons of issues. You had to save everything at least twice. They came out with a slightly better model that had still a consumer model, but at least had like auto noise sound leveling, which helped a little bit. And then finally they came out with one that was a little more data grade. And again, that's the one you wanted. Again, if you're a collector and you're a completist, yeah, you find them, you put them in your collection. Honestly, I don't know. I have one of these. It works, and I usually only break it out to demonstrate to my kids how torturous it was. Save and load programs, just right. And I had forgotten a couple of years ago. I broke it out. Like, okay, here, we'll load a program. Go change the oil in my car. Forget how good we have it today. And of course, the mini disc system. You can pretty much get any kind of peripherals you want. You get modems, printers, and all kinds of software available. A lot of games. Company called Big Five actually.
Yeah, Big Five.
Yeah, Big Five.
They're awesome.
They made some great games, and they went on to make games for other platforms as well. They took an Atari joystick, modified it, so you could plug it right into the expansion connector of the TRS-80, and so it made it a lot more fun to play games. And it was a lot better than the mod usually did. You get Atari joystick and hardwire the connectors right to the letters on the keyboard that you would normally use to manipulate the player. So this was a much nicer option. A lot of games supported it. Music generators, voice synthesizers, you name it. RS-232 interfaces, all kinds of programming tools. Tiny Pascal was probably the most frustrating thing I ever got. I bought that on cassette because it's the only thing I could get for Pascal. At that time, 16K. You could basically write a 4-line program. I don't know why they even bothered with it, but again, so that's why I kind of forced everybody to learn assembly language if you want to do anything cool. Which was not a bad thing. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? Oh, that's right. I forgot they actually did have X10 controllers back then too. That was a real popular thing. I know people now even go looking for the old extent controllers and can't quite understand that one, but people collect everything. I don't know. So some stuff I added from the last time I did this presentation. I figured talk about the Model 3 a little bit. Model 3 was the follow-on, came out in 1980. Mainly, it came out because the Model 1 failed FCC emissions testing. Right? They were going to get fined, and so they came out with this new form factor that passed FCC specs. Actually, it was a boom for them in the education market. Something like this is a lot more desirable. No pieces to become disconnected and stolen or broken. It's a lot easier to add storage. They sold the base model without any disk drives. It was basically a Model 1 in a bigger case.
Well, those were typically, like in a classroom environment, they'd be networked to a main computer where the actual storage was.
Absolutely correct, yeah, and Radio Shack did sell a system like that, like a lot of other systems at the time. They had a classroom network system that you could run. That's actually really rare right now, very hard to find. So yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and then, you know, it worked pretty well. There were some minor compatibility issues from the Model 1. They changed some addresses where certain I/O and certain routines were mapped. It wasn't that big a deal. Programs were pretty easily portable. The basic was pretty much the same. And the nice thing about this was a lot easier to get the memory upgraded, a lot cheaper to put in a disk drive. So if you started with this, you could graduate to a better system, and probably encourage you to really do a lot more with it, either whether you use application programs or programming. Programming, saving something with cassettes was for the birds, so you only go so far with that.
Those drives were also much, much more dependable, and they did not destroy disks left and right.
Oh, these drives, yeah,
They were wonderful.
That's a nice thing about Logan. Oh, yes.
Same as the IBM tandem voltage.
I think they're shoe guards.
These were, yeah, single-sided shoe guards, but you could, I don't know if it's this or the Model 4s, you could put the tandons in. I mean, I have a Model 4 with the double-sided tandons.
Is it the same interface?
Yeah.
It's a
Same
standard shoe guard. I thought those were Texas peripheral. They're like cross-reduced tandons.
Okay.
It was made by Tandem, but it was Radio Shack's cheaper version of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Model 1 had shoe guard, the original. I don't know, I had 400 Ls on mine, never had problems.
Yeah, a lot of drive, I mean, I haven't found a drive in that form factor that hasn't really worked in there.
Yeah.
So, they're pretty interchangeable. Very easy to work on. So that was the Model 3. It was a very easy transition. 1983, they released the Model 4 and 4P. Model 4 removed, didn't really remove Model 1 compatibility. You still had the Model 3 mode that you could go into, and that's the same. It was pretty much like running a Model 3. Model 4 had an 80-column mode, but no graphics in Model 4 mode. So that was definitely just a kind of business mode that was aimed at a different market. A lot of business software you could get for it. Although Tandy did offer a high-res graphic card you could put in, and it was a pretty popular option. You know, a lot of Model 4s you see on the market today. Half the time you get it, you open it, like, oh, surprise, surprise, and high-res graphics card. It's a little bonus. Not apparent from the outside.
Had a faster clock speed too, I think.
In the Model 4 mode, it had it was, I think, roughly double.
It was 4 megs.
4
megs, yeah. So, and also you could put a full 64K of RAM in there, so you could run CPM for the first time. I think you could do it on the Model 3 as well, but you needed
Model 3 needed modified CPM because
Nobody.
right,
on the Model 3 couldn't be switched out
right.
address space. Because the Model 4 was set up, you could switch the ROM out.
Yeah, exactly, just like standard
So that was
CDM.
just a full 64K of RAM that was accessible.
Yep, yeah, with the 80 columns and the 64K RAM, you basically had a fully compatible CDM machine. So, you know, they were great. There was 3 different models, 1069, 1069A, and the 1070. The 1069A had the gate array chip, which instead of it replaced some discrete logic. The nice thing about that was it made it easier to do memory upgrading. With the gate array, you just added the chips. Without it, I think you had to
There's a
solder
PAL
a jumper
chip.
or something.
You had to change the PAL chip.
Oh, the PAL chip, yeah, right. And I think the same thing with the high-res graphics card. Yeah, the gate array was a little, I think it's just basically one jumper. And they gave you a little clip for that. You didn't have to solder or anything. Just clipped it onto the board. The 4P was kind of a cut-down Model 4. It didn't have the built-in Model 3 mode, but you could load that off from a file off a diskette, say if you wanted to use older software. Yes?
Sorry, before the Model 4, your operating system was basic, or was there a version of DOS?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, so with the Model 3, you could load, if you got a disk drive, and you had at least, I think it was minimum 32K memory that they recommended, you could run TRS-DOS,
Okay.
right? And then you can run disk basic as well, which gave you some more.
Did it have basic on a chip?
So it did have basic on a chip. If you booted this up without a disk drive, it would just default into basic, just like a Model 1.
The 3 and the 4.
Yeah.
All had that.
Oh, that before had that too, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
whole model line did.
Yeah, the 4P didn't actually have the ROM in it.
Right.
So if you just turn it on without a disk in there, it just sits there asking for a disk.
Just has a question mark or something, right?
No, it actually
No,
has,
Okay.
It says asking for a disk, yeah.
it says insert
Inside.
disk or something in 3 different languages.
Uh-huh.
The cool thing about that though was you could do a lot of that. You could boot that machine off the network. You could not the network. You could boot it off RS-232. So you didn't have to boot from media, which was
There was a network mode built into it, they never released the adapter. It
okay.
had provisions for ArcNet,
Okay.
but they never released the adapter for it.
So the software on the, doesn't run on the 4P, that could run on the 4 though, right?
Yes, it does.
It does. Yeah. So that's compatible.
The hardware in 4 and 4P is virtually identical. The only difference is 4P doesn't have the Model 3 ROM in it.
Okay.
So everything else is identical.
But so the older software that ran on the 3 couldn't run?
You could. You needed to run you could load that ROM off of the diskette.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's called Model3A.com or something.
Model 3, Model III/A.
Right.
Okay.
That was
the one you used the go command to start.
When you
Right.
would boot
I do that with my mom.
it in Model
Oh,
3
yeah.
DOS, it would load that ROM file in, and then it was essentially Model 3.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And yes.
Also, I just want to point out, only heathens actually run TRS-DOS, everyone else runs new DOS 8.
All right. Or LDOS.
Or else,
I like LDOS. Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, if you were a diehard TRS-DOS user, you were, I guess, just didn't like yourself very much. There were some issues.
So what is the operating system you recommend for using?
So if
Oh, that's a.
Oh yeah. So if you got a Model 1, I think NuDOS is probably the best one. Model 3, you have a lot more options. Now it becomes like a religious war. Model 4, basically TRS-DOS 6.2 was
LS-DOS.
right, was LS-DOS, which was the best one. So Model 4 TRS 6.2, Model 3,
I ran new DOS on my Model 3.
NuDOS, yeah, Model 1 NuDOS for sure.
Yeah, you can run LDOS 5.3 on Model 1. and-
Model 1. Oh, okay. So then maybe that was a good choice as well. Yeah. So I mean, Model 4 again, pretty cool. Slightly smaller screen, 9-inch screen. but it was definitely luggable. You could move it around. I mean, my experience is it's pretty sturdy. I've inadvertently treated a little rougher than it should have been, and it's survived. Yeah, I got scared a couple of times, but it, you know, works really well. It's a pretty cool machine, especially if you're using it as a CPM machine. It's, you know, it's a nice little portable CPM machine. Let's see anything. Oh no, only weigh 26 pounds. How great is that? Oh yeah, the cool thing was too, if you played a game on it, you could, you didn't need the cassette port out. It actually routed anything going to that port from a program, got routed to an internal speaker. This cassette output was kind of, you didn't need it at that point anyway. So that was kind of a nice little touch. You still have fun with it. So again, if you're collecting, looking to collect, I think a Model 1 and a 3 are you know, you definitely want them. Model 4, I would recommend, you know, if you don't want to buy everything, the 26.1069A or the 1070, which is the 4D. Oh, I didn't point out the difference between the 4 and the 4D. So besides the PAL chip, 4D came with double-sided drives, but that's not a little trivia thing. It's not what the D stood for. The D stood for Deskmate. It came with Deskmate software, which was their little office suite from back then. Yes.
What kind of production numbers between the 3 and the 4 do you know? Total produced?
You know what?
At least they're relatively
I
to
think
each other.
so. From what I understand, they sold a lot more 4s than they did 3s. It was on the market. Well, 4 was definitely on the market longer,
Really?
all told, between the different models. Yeah, I mean, again, it was. They sold a lot more into the school and business market because it was a you know, full CPM machine. You could put 128K RAM in it. And
That's fine. Just my anecdotal experience is that the 3s are more available than the 4s. I can't find a half-decent 4.
yeah, I'm not sure why that is. The 4s are definitely on the market longer. Although, yeah, I mean, maybe that didn't equate to sales, right? Just because it was on the
The
market.
4s were sold until about 94.
Oh,
Yeah, we
Wow.
Yeah. But that was mainly supporting
the existing base.
supporting a bad habit.
Well, the existing base, yeah. I know there was, I know one gentleman who, he wrote and maintained a point of sale system. He would bundle those machines with it, and you know, probably him and a lot of people, big market for those. Emulation, there's a lot of emulators. If you're running Windows, if you're interested, TRS-82 is a good one. There's a new one. There's one being developed right now. There's a TRS-80 Discord, if anybody's on Discord. That's really interesting. There's a lot of guys on there that are really knowledgeable about this stuff. Although, maybe you can invite only Discord, I'm not sure. But there is someone developing a new emulator, and it's really accurate, and it's almost cycle accurate, and it's got a lot of great features. Just have to keep an eye on that. And then if you're a Linux or Mac user, there's SDL TRS, which is, you know, again, a good emulator. Emulates pretty much everything, cassette, disk, even, I think you even emulate printer output, which is kind of cool. Let's see, what else we got? I mean, references, I didn't put a ton in here, but again, if you're looking to restore, repair, a lot of people, you know, don't really care for the SAM stuff. I think they're a good starting point, good reference for some technical diagrams. Some of it you can't 100% trust it. Some of the stuff in the SAM's computer facts aren't 100% accurate, although it depends on which one you're looking at. Like, I don't know if the Commodore stuff, I don't know how good they are.
As far as,
Accuracy.
you know, Commodore had so many variations.
Yeah.
It's hard to say.
Well, that was the thing too. Even Radio Shack did that, right? They make some engineering, like a minor engineering change that really wouldn't affect the end user experience, but you're trying to fix
Well,
something.
you look at a schematic or an part on a circuit, and it's not there, or it's something different. And
Right.
so you don't know which version to get. So.
Right. Yeah, and unless you're really knowledgeable about this stuff, it'll throw you. Right? But,
It was the Japanese or the German or the American or the Canadian or, you know, where it was manufactured.
true.
You know, what parts do they have available that week?
Right. Yeah. Only really affected you if you're trying to repair it. Right? This TRS-80, TRS-80.com, our GoConnect site is a great resource for information. It's just loaded with really good info on TRS-80s, as well as TRS-80.org. There's a ton of TRS-80 software out on archive.org. So if you want to dabble in emulators, it's a great place to get software. What else? The disk format of the TRS-80 is fairly simple. Again, they use standard drives. So if anybody ever uses image disk on DOS, it's a pretty popular program for creating diskettes from disk images. You can actually create TRS-80 disk images using it, assuming you have a proper controller. Right? There's certain controller chips that work better than others. If you research image disk, IMGDSK, it'll give you the details about which controller chips work well. There's a particular Western Digital chip that will let you create pretty much any disk compatible with those physical drive formats. And I know there's an Adaptec card that has that chip on it, so that one's pretty popular with people who are maintaining disk archives.
What about media density from that? Like, for a 5 1/4 drive in your PC, would it be better to have a 360K drive with, I guess, the fatter head that worked on the double density disk a lot better than, say, trying to use a high density disk as a substitute?
Yeah, I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't put a high density disk in there. You know, a lot of the stuff, everything basically was published was on, 360K or 180K or lower even. There's some of the formats that are a little strange, like on the Model 1, you could get a double density upgrade from drives, but in order to maintain compatibility, I forget when they started the track, again, 1 or 0. Track 0 was always single density.
Okay.
And then, right, and so you can duplicate those disks with that image disk program, but again, that's where it's important to have that right controller chip. Not a lot of disk controllers can handle switching disk densities on
I'm
the same
saying more of
disk.
the media itself. High density 5 1/4 have a different magnetic material that requires a little more.
So they have a higher coercivity.
Plus, it has a smaller head, so you could write a double density. You could write it. Was it 720 360K? What is the double-sided?
So you could put in a high density drive, and you could coax it to do 720. But you're right though, the high density media needed higher coercivity to change the bit state rate.
Ideally, you want one of the old 360K 5 1/4 drives to do it.
You really want to stick with a 360K drive. If you see them for sale, if you see them in old machines, I hate to say that, I order them. When I say 360K drives, I order them. Because you can put them in 180K capable machines that work just
I
fine.
guess you could take the drive out of your 3 or 4 and put that controller
On
too,
a
and
Model
do
1.
it on the real disk drive,
Yeah.
and then switch it all back.
Oh yeah, you could. You could definitely put them on single density controllers and they'll work just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And again, people have put 720K 3.5-inch floppies in a Model 4P, and it works. Because again, you're just doubling you double
It has the same interface. It's just-
same interface, and the drive geometry is similar enough where you can make it work. So it's it's pretty good. But yeah, I would definitely stay away from high density drives and high density media. People insist that you can write to high density 5 1/4 in a standard drive, and you can, but they're not going to be super reliable over time. Right? You're just not the read strength, the signal, it just isn't as high as what would come off high density drive, and it's a lot harder to change the state of those bits on high density media.
Just for the record, on the Commodore drive, it definitely doesn't work. High density disk media won't work at all on a Commodore drive. It just, like you said, you can't change the state of the media. It just doesn't
signal there to reliably flip the bits. Yeah, and vice versa, putting low density media in a high density drive is a crapshoot. You know, it's super high quality disk media, you might get away with it, but again, a month from now, you put that in there and try to read it, might not be good. That's really all I had for the TRS-80 stuff. You know, very high level. I wish I was more of an electrical engineer and could dive into this stuff like some of these other guys, but we have a little bit of time. The one thing I was a little sad about is, I'm sorry, yes.
We thought you might want to touch on if people have written disk emulators, hardware disk emulators for the Model 3s and 4s yet.
Yes, very good. Actually, I did want to mention that. Thank you for reminding me. So, you can. So let's go even before the 3.4. You can actually use GoTex on Model 1, 3, 4. You just have to. I strongly suggest you flash them with the flash floppy firmware. If you don't know what that is, just Google it. It comes in a million things come up. Get the cheapest GoTex drive you can find on eBay. There's no magic ones that work better than others. But the firmware is key. Firmware's free. You do need a programmer to flash it though. It's an extra thing you have to buy. Was it I forgot JTAG? There's a little cable you have to get to flash the firmware. JTAG programmer, thank you. And then yeah, you get the download the flash floppy firmware for free, and you can actually use that as a substitute disk drive. Again, I would suggest not running totally diskless. Try to have at least one good working drive in there, in case you find some media or if you have a lot of media. But beyond that, now let's go to hard drives. There's Ian Maverick from Australia makes a great tool called the Fred, and it's a hard drive emulator for the Model 4 or 3. It actually even works on the 1, but you have to order a special. You gotta let them know when you're ordering it. That's for Model 1. But it works really good. You can get it. I think there's an auto boot mod for it now.
Yeah.
So you don't have to boot a floppy first.
Yeah.
So it's really nice. I mean, you could literally have every single piece of TRS-80 software on one of these things on an SD card, and it works great. Very fast. I've had one for a couple of years. Very reliable. And Ian's really good about supporting these things. And if you ever want to meet him or talk to him or ask him a question, he usually shows up at Tandy Assembly, which is the past couple of years has been in Ohio, near the end of the year, like in November. And he shows up with his stuff, and he's just a great source of information. There is another TRS-80 drive emulator as well. It emulates hard drives, it emulates floppies. It has a Ethernet port on it, and I think also RTC, real-time clock chip.
VGA out.
And VGA out, yeah. And I can't remember the name of it, but it's a
Miles.
MISE, yes.
And the
Model 1 system emulator.
yeah, the Model 3 system expand.
Right, system
And the
expander,
Model
right.
3.4 versions, the MEs.
Right.
M3 SE.
Yeah, M3 SE and M1 SE. Again, really cool. It really brings your old hardware into the modern age. Yes.
So, totally hypothetically speaking, if you went to an estate sale and picked up like a Model 4 that had, a couple of drives, but you have no media, no anything, what is the best way to essentially bootstrap being able to get software on it? Like,
Ira Gold plan.
well,
If you send an email to his site, he will send you this.
Yes.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's the way I did it when I
Okay.
first got a model like 5 years ago. I asked Ira, I gave him a little donation for postage and diskettes. He sent me like 7 discs.
Oh, cool.
Really
All right.
nice guy.
Yeah, because that's that fundamental first step.
Oh, yes.
Unless you portage through the technology layers.
Yeah.
Exactly. But if you're really in a jam, you're waiting for these things to come in the mail. Like I said, get a GoTech. You can put a bunch of you can put a bunch of images on a USB key, and you're off to the races.
Can you bootstrap with cassette though? Could you did they make anything like ATP for the Apple for the? Or
I don't
DVD?
think there's any.
I haven't seen anything like that.
You can't bootstrap a disc with like a cassette.
So yeah, they didn't come standard with serial ports.
Okay.
So I haven't seen anything worse than the serial through the cassette.
Mhm.
So yeah, I haven't seen anything similar to ATP for the Apple.
The Model 4P can boot off the serial,
Yeah.
and there is software out there to let you run like a Linux box as a server for it, but that's the only one that can boot directly off the.
Yeah, that capability is built into the ROM. So
Can you talk a little bit about like what the, if any, there's like any kind of what the lineage is with the CoCo and the TSR, the TSR models, the 1, 2, 3, like is there any shared,
so there's really not, except for the name TRS-80.
just the name?
So I have TRS-80,
Yeah.
Tandy Radio Shack -80 for the C80, right?
Right.
The first CoCos, they kept the TRS-80 name. By the CoCo 3, they dropped the TRS-80. It was Tandy CoCo 3, but yeah, there's really nothing in common at all, except for the
Some peripherals and things.
some of the peripherals that had a 4-pin serial port on the back, and so you could use some peripherals in common serial port. The graphics, the semi-graphics characters, they had in common, but that really had nothing to do with anything. The CoCo was a pretty cool machine. It was used the TI graphics chip that was kind of common across a lot of different machines. So if you were, especially a assembly language programmer, you had familiarity with it. It made it easy to program. The 6809 CPU, probably one of my favorite 8-bit CPUs. Very easy to program. It was there was no limits on mixing layout instruction. You could use what register. So if you did any assembly language program at all, it was like a dream. Really, really nice, very efficient processor. They had the OS9 operating system that you could get for the CoCo 3. If you had 64K or more memory, or even for the CoCo 2. And OS9 was a kind of Unix-like operating system. And it was actually multi-threaded, believe it or not. There were some demos I remember running back then. Somebody launched like a line drawing demo. They launched 256 threads. Yeah, and so it was amazing. You could do some really high-end stuff. That's where you got your best word processors, your best, things like that. You run them off OS9.
Was there a similar scene like going on? Like I mean, I know like I had neighbors that had the CoCo, and there was like a pretty regular cassette drop that they would receive like on an almost monthly basis, like full of software and stuff that people I guess were pretty popular. Was there something similar for the
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I'm on the staff, so I have to be in touch with the.
There's
So I can answer that, actually.
Oh yeah, thank you.
The TRS-80 swap crew was pretty active.
Right.
So, and we would go, all of this is illegal, to start with, but
Dude, it was the 80s, man.
I
Seriously.
just
Was anything
state
legal?
that, but we would regularly have about every 2 or 3 weeks, you'd show up with your binders full of floppies and just sit and copy stuff.
Wow.
There's an entire community doing that.
That's awesome. Is there like an archive of any of that stuff still available? Like,
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
huge,
Oh, yeah.
there's a huge
Jobs of
CoCo
it.
archive, and actually there's still an annual get-together for the CoCo folks in Ohio, which apparently is just the place for all these things.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. I think they're on the 27th annual last CoCo Fest or something.
CoCo Fest actually going on this weekend, I think. I thought it was this weekend.
This weekend or is it?
This weekend, yeah. So we're competing with CoCo Fest with stuff.
People don't touch on it too often, but it's like amazing how much. I mean, regardless of like what running crew you're in now, like whether you're a Atari or a Commodore person, but in America and Australia, for most people at that time period, the first real computer that anyone ever got to touch was at Radio Shack, right? I couldn't walk into a computer store in Detroit and touch an Apple II or any of those computers, but there was always every town had a Radio Shack, and most of them would have like a Model 1 or a Model 2 up and running with like all the documentation next to it, and they love to have kids come in and sit down and use it, like and have people come and see kids using.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Not my Radio Shack.
Not yours. They really get out, go touch a kid.
I went there to play after I ran out of hours at the arcade,
Yeah.
and they would kick me out after about
Oh,
5
man.
minutes.
That's too bad.
Yeah, I mean,
I was
I
14.
encouraged it. The one Apple store I did have in my area They
Yeah.
carry around.
I think it's important to note that there was actually a Model 2.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and the Model 2 was a business machine that they made 8-inch floppies, the whole 9 yards, but it was targeted in a completely different direction. It has very little in common with what we're talking about.
My dad worked for Massey Ferguson, and they had a Model 2 in their engineering department for some reason. I don't know why they had that there,
They
but
were weird.
Yeah, for engineering, I wouldn't know why. I mean, it was clocked faster. It was 480. There's a 4 megahertz Z88. You could get up to 64 megs of memory in it.
there was some part of their process basically where they needed to have a database of of bits and things like that they were using for machine
Yeah, it had
processing.
8-inch floppies. And you know, it was more of a business system. It actually evolved pretty well. The 12, the 2 went to the Model 12,
Yeah.
which then went to the Model 16, which you could get a 68000 coprocessor board for, and then you can run Xenix. That really made it a high-powered business machine. I remember when I was a teenager, a local restaurant chain they had those installed in their restaurants, and they all talked to each other over modems. So it was really great. As a business machine, it was pretty cool.
You can still play Pac-Man on it though, I hope.
You could.
It's like text-based
someone's
Pac-Man,
going to write a game. And the 16 actually ended up, 16D, which ended up, the last evolution of it was the Tandy 6000. And those are highly sought after by collectors. You know, very, very cool. There was, I think, 6 or 8 slots in the back, and you could get all kinds of memory expansions and different kinds of disk controllers, and it was fully supported hard drives. And again, you can use solid-state alternatives for those as well.
Are you guys working to try to archive, as Radio Shack kind of goes into the sunset? Are people trying to archive whatever materials are available concerning this whole era from them? Is there a
Yeah, I think even before
repository that's
Radio
up
Shack,
Fairly.
I think even before they went under, there were a lot of people doing that anyway.
Yeah.
And I think them going under maybe helped get in people's minds that, crap, this stuff is going away. Not that Tandy, Tandy had some stuff in their archives around it, but they weren't the keepers of this stuff. I don't think they really cared as much about it as the user community does.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't think it really made a big difference as far as preservation of the old stuff, the documentation and everything.
Other than Australia, were there other places where there were where there was a big contingent of Tandy and Radio Shack users?
Canada, it was pretty big. Australia, for some reason, maybe because Tandy had a lot.
Didn't they have another chain that was down there?
Yeah,
that
It was
was
Yeah.
similar name. Yeah, it wasn't called Radio Shack.
It was they had a computer electronics magazine that was linked to them that people read a lot.
Yeah, Europe too. Canada. So,
I forget the name of the chain.
I can't remember, yeah.
So, I know you sent up a couple of references from a hardware diagnosis, repair, maintenance, all of that. Is the relevant material up now? Because I know that there's some really good material for the Commodore 64 and some of the other lines. Is it as solid, or is there gaps in the troubleshooting and diagnostic and schematics and all those kinds of things?
The service manuals for most of
Yeah, you can
the
get most
Radio
of them.
Shack machines are up in archive.
And they're pretty good. A lot of service manuals were meant for the guys at the service centers.
Okay.
And so they're pretty detailed.
Yeah.
They take you not just through, okay, here's what this part is and where it is. It actually tells you diagnostic steps. So they're pretty good.
Yeah, the
There's some
actual
of the better.
Model 1 service manuals were very well written.
Yeah.
It explained a lot. It wasn't just a book of schematics.
Yeah,
It explained how the
I
hardware.
just remember with the CoCo, the really good reference manual for the CoCo 2, and the CoCo 3 you just kind of had to guess, for some pieces. I think that was the variation, but yeah, I wasn't sure if they had all the information for the 4, or is it mostly for the 1?
No, you can definitely get it. They're all online. I don't know of any reference manual that isn't a PDF somewhere online that you can get. They're all available for the most part. But again, if you're really interested in this stuff, if you can get out to Tandy Assembly, it's really great. A lot of good information. there's a lot of sales there, a lot of CoCo presence as well, and vendors too. Cloud9 is there. You can get a lot of like nice expansion items for CoCo. You can get like VGA adapters and memory expansions. And again, Ian's out there from Australia selling his Fred and other cool things.
There's also the podcast, the Trash Talk.
Trash Talk by Pete Lewinsky. Pete is a great, again, Pete's another one. He's a font of knowledge. He has a vast collection. He knows pretty much everything there is to know about anything Radio Shack, TRS-80.
Trash 80 is not derogatory. Is that in the community? Like, you call it Trash 80?
Oh, we called it, when I was a kid, we called them that, yeah. I mean, Ben's just saying it. I can say it.
Yeah, but not anybody else.
Chris,
No,
you can't say it. I can say it.
But no, seriously, I do, for some people, I think it's a derogatory thing.
No,
If
some
I-
people, yeah.
If I have a sense of somebody, misusing it, I'll correct them. I'll say, you know what, that's not trash. It's a really amazing machine and respect it.
I mean, it was a good machine. You look at some of the low-cost machines that came out afterward, like the Timex Sinclair. But even that I wouldn't call trash, right? Look, it came out, it was $100. And again, similar to the Radio Shack, it was a lot of people's first exposure to computers.
Yeah.
It was accessible.
I mean, in Europe, like in England, like the Specky is like the one that everybody remembers in terms of the era. Yeah.
Exactly, and I think anything that got people interested, especially if it got a kid like me to become interested in something that was potentially a career path, that's got all the value in the world. I don't care, technologically, I don't care how bad it was, relatively.
But people forget the religious wars of like that era, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I remember like, if you were on bulletin boards at that time, and you were Atari, like,
Atari versus Amiga,
Billboards around, but like the Commodore and whatever, they call that or whatever on that.
I never used that terminology.
Yeah, well, it was a different era then. Maybe you were better. You
No,
had a better.
I was on CompuServe back then. I was well involved in the Flame Wars.
Awesome.
8-bit and 16-bit.
Yeah, you know what's really funny that they brought back the errata online, like Cherry House has done that. It's too bad that they don't do that for CompuServe.
As a matter of fact, Thomas Cherryholmes is here.
Yeah, I know.
You've seen him?
Yeah, he's been really good. He's awesome. But it's like, why hasn't something?
Thank you so much. Thanks for your input.
I mean, I didn't even know that that errata and Plato term even existed like during the day. But everyone knows what CompuServe is. Why hasn't CompuServe been resurrected in some form for people?
I mean,
Are we going to do that?
It was kind of like BBS on steroids.
Yeah.
Right? So everybody here, well, I'm not going to say anything. A lot of people here are old enough to have probably used a BBS in their day. It was like a giant BBS.
Yeah.
I just personally, I think a lot of people are kind of jaded. I think they're kind of past message boards and things like that.
What?
I mean, Facebook is just a giant message board. I know Discord, can be used as a giant message board. I just think it's a little bit different.
Dude, those modem adapters now, that's the new hotness in vintage computing, right? Is you hook up one of those like RS-232 modem adapters.
You tell them
and you're like, you tell them through BBS. Yeah, totally, man.
Absolutely. No, I get it. But that honestly, that's for us.
Yeah.
I don't know how far it would go past.
Don't you want to play Mega Wars again, like with like a bunch of users or whatever? I mean, come on, man.
Trade Wars, yeah, exactly.
Good talk.